Welcome everyone to episode 10 of Future Strong. I'm delighted, Lindsay. We got to 10 episodes. With
double digits. We're double digits.
Amazing. It's like a coming of age. And we have a very esteemed guest, Mike Abrams, which I'm going to not just interview, I'm going to introduce in a second. My name's Nikki Garchea. I'm the co-founder and chief customer officer of the global strengths and development business Capfinity. And every week, I launch this show, Future Strong, where we discuss everything to do with careers, early talent, career transition. And we have a really great topic this week. So I'm going to hand to my co-host, Lindsay Pollock, who has a special connection to our guest. And without further ado, Lindsay.
Nikki, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to be with you. We are here at our 10th episode, and I am so excited to introduce our guest. But first, I see that we have comments coming in from some of our regular audience members. Welcome. Good morning, Fred Burke. Anyone else who's here, please say hello. We're glad to have you back. I'm so delighted to introduce Mike Abrams, who is the founder and president of FourBlock. I am a proud board member of FourBlock, which is an organization that supports career transition for veterans, also has a program for military spouses. Mike is going to tell us all about it, but Mike, I want to tell the story of how we first met, which is that I asked to interview you for my book, The Remix. I forget how we originally got connected. Did you reach out to me first?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, great to be on the show. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, right.
Lindsay.
Hi,
really
welcome.
appreciate it. Really appreciate it. No, so I mean, I was doing some research into who out there in the world are experts in career transition, career development. And I remember I Googled an article, and it came up with like 10 or 20 people who had best-selling books or who were considered the leading forward-edge thinkers on this topic. And I just I somehow tried to reach out to everybody on that list, looking them up on LinkedIn or whatever. And, Lindsay, you replied. I think a few others may have replied, but you replied right away. I think it was just a couple days. And you were very close to where we were in New York City, right? So I think you came up to Columbia at the time or around there in Upper West Side there. And we just sat down and talked. And you said, absolutely, would love to, help out, veterans in transition. And so that's how it started. And I think you said, I'm writing a book too. And I'd like to interview for the book. So that's
basically how it started. And my memory is I walked out of that room basically almost on your board. So
right.
I was so impressed by the program that I wanted to get involved. And I think we closed the deal near Columbia at a little cafe over lunch. But it's been a huge honor and pleasure to serve on the board. And the veterans that I have met have been just absolutely incredible. We've got a couple of other frequent audience members here. Nikki, you might have seen Gemma Elson. Welcome, Gemma, and Trudy Steinfeld.
Gemma.
We are so glad that you're here. Please post any questions that you have for Mike. But Mike, we've been talking around FourBlock and how incredible it is and the work that you do. Can you tell us your story of serving in the Marines, coming from a military family, and then how you started FourBlock and what your excellent organization does?
Sure. So, I mean, I was in college. I was at SUNY Cortland, just south of Syracuse, when 9/11 hit. And then the very next day, I went down and talked to a Marine Corps recruiter about joining the Marine Corps. And that following summer, I found myself at Officer Candidate School down in beautiful Quantico, Virginia. And shortly after that was a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and did a couple deployments, one to Afghanistan. And then my last couple of years on active duty was in New York as a recruiter. And it was during that time that I was beginning to think about transitioning and what I wanted to do next. And as part of my responsibilities as a recruiter, I got to go to a lot of really nice military events throughout New York City. So these black tie events, I'm in my dress blues. I'm out there kind of recruiting and building relationships with people. And as part of that, I had the honor of escorting a man named Corporal Alan Striffler, who was he called himself an Iwo Jima survivor. So he was on one of the first waves into Iwo Jima during World War II, and he's got an incredible story that I won't necessarily get into. He unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, but developed a really good relationship with him. And one night he confided in me that when he came back from the war, he had post-traumatic stress, and it wasn't called that back then, but he had all the telltale signs, knowing then what he knew. He said the only thing that saved him was his uncle came and dragged his hungover butt out of bed one morning, and that was his words, and got him a job at Standard Oil in Stamford, Connecticut. And he was punching out invoices. He was sitting next to a Normandy Army vet, and they had him in the Marine Division, which he thought was kind of funny. But he said that job gave him meaning and purpose again. It gave him a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and he met his wife shortly thereafter, had a beautiful family, and had a really successful business career. But he credits that job with really saving his life. So that got me thinking as I was transitioning and as I was beginning to interview and really running into some challenges with folks, as a lot of the men and women who I served with knew that I was in New York City and transitioning, or were calling me saying, hey, I'm getting out too. Like, what are you doing? How do we do this? So that was really what led to the start of FourBlock was, how can we bridge that gap between, the military and the business world? How can we ensure that particularly enlisted servicemen and women who are transitioning out, where those pipelines into corporate America are not necessarily really defined for them. As an officer, it's a much clearer path to go from an officer into a corporate job. It's a lot less for an enlisted serviceman or woman. So FourBlock was really designed to help those folks get into more corporate positions.
And Mike, I know FourBlock is celebrating its 10th year, which is incredible. Can you talk about exactly what kind of programming you offer? And I know a lot of it is based, as you said, on your own transition. So what exactly is the programming of FourBlock, and what do the veterans find most valuable about the program?
Sure. So it's all about relationship building. That's the core of what we do. It's making sure that a veteran and an employer can sit down, sort of kneecap to kneecap, but in today's post-COVID world, it would be, I guess, computer screen to computer screen. But it's really about them connecting with one another, learning from one another, so that a relationship can be created and both parties make better career decisions. So the veteran makes a better decision as to what industry or what company would be the best fit for them based on what they want to do with their life and their values and their circumstances and where they want to end up. And then the employer too, making sure that this person is going to be a really good fit for them. It's not, I think when veteran unemployment rate skyrocketed there in 2010 to 2012 timeframe, everyone was like, we got to hire a veteran, right? And everyone did a really good job of just going out there trying to find a veteran and hiring them, but they did a really bad job of ensuring that they were a good fit and they retained them. So then you had all these veterans who were in these jobs, which is a good thing, but then they realized, this isn't for me, right? And then you had people kind of trying to figure out what to do next. So our program is really designed around helping people make better decisions so that they don't have to jump around into jobs. The curriculum is really, there's two kind of interrelated pathways for the curriculum. One is just, what do I want to be when I grow up type stuff? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Kind of, you really triangulating sort of, what do you want with your family, with a career, work-life balance, like making sure you've got a really, you've really thought through kind of what you want and what your family needs moving forward. And then we get into some of the technical competencies of a career search, like resume writing, interview skills. How do you communicate your value? How do you build relationships? How do you negotiate a salary? Things like that.
One of the things, Mike, we'd love to hear about is, what are some of the kind of most impactful skills that people learn on the program that leads them, you think, to then be successful in those choices? And I'm really interested about this fit as well, that actually they find roles that work to their strengths, that they stay with.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say our program is really about teaching you how to fish, not to use that type of analogy, right? There's placement firms and there's organizations out there that will help you find a job. But what we do is we're not a placement firm. We're not a headhunter. We're a not-for-profit. We don't get paid if a particular company hires one of our vets. We want them to hire as many as possible, right? And our sort of, I don't know if loyalty is the right word, but our focus is on ensuring that veteran is going where they want to go career-wise. So if they wanted to be a museum curator, we'll help you get connected to a museum and we'll figure it out for you. Or if you want to work on Wall Street or whatever, So we're not going to encourage a veteran to work at a company just because that company is sponsoring us, right? That's not what we do. So we really just teach how to fish. I mean, we teach you how to build these relationships, how to manage your professional network. And we let you know that, our resume class isn't the best resume class out there. right? We can help put your resume in a box, but you know what's even better is connecting with someone who works at that company who can then give you specific feedback on your resume for that specific company or for that specific position, right? We'll do mock interviews and we'll give you feedback on how you do, but the person that could help you the most on preparing for an interview is someone who works at that company who knows the person who's going to interview you, right? Or, the person who's actually going to sit down and interview for this job, so it's about building those relationships so that you can get the best information for you, as you pursue a particular, job or a company.
And how can organizations get involved with FourBlock in terms of supporting, sponsorship? I'm curious about how those connections are made.
Sure. So you can just connect with me or any one of our team members.
There you go. You've had it here.
Going to our website, right? Or you can just, I can put my contact information on here too. So no problem at all. But there's really two main reasons why. Well, I guess three, but two main reasons why a company would partner with us. One is that we're a good solid pipeline for talent. So we're working with about 425 when you include the spouse program, servicemen and women and military spouses every semester. So this year, we'll probably hit anywhere between 900 and 1,000 folks going through our program. And we have several thousand alumni. We've got a couple hundred coaches. I mean, we've got a really large growing network now. So some folks look at us and they say, we're trying to hire more veterans, and we see it as a pretty solid pipeline for us. Another reason is because we have created a pretty strong platform for companies to allow their employees to give back to the community in a meaningful way. And we didn't even know we were doing that. So there was a couple of companies that came back to us and said, we don't care at all about hiring any of your veterans. That's not a focus for us. We already actually do a really good job of hiring veterans. So if we hire any from you, it's a bonus. But what we really care about is that our employees find it super meaningful to host one of your classes and mentor your veterans. And a couple companies have actually said that they view us as a good place for skills-based volunteering. So for people who are going to step up into management roles for the first time, they like getting them in front of a class, for like work on public speaking or mentoring someone. So the skills-based volunteering is also something that we've heard a few times as well. And then the third one, which is a little bit less, but it's just like branding in the military connected community. So we've worked really hard to try to build a reputable, strong brand, and some companies are just looking to strengthen their brand in the military connected community. So when you look at, the number of hits we get on our website or social media or whatever, they view that as an opportunity to kind of get their brand out to their community as well. So that's a little bit less of a reason why, but it's, some companies have valued that.
Mike, you and I co-host the FourBlock podcast, little shout out for our podcast. And we talk a lot about the unique challenges that veterans face in the job search. And I sort of represent the civilian side, you represent the military side. And we talk a lot about some of the awkwardness, honestly, that happens in these situations of different kinds of language. Can you talk a little bit about your own experience making the transition? And I love the advice that you always give to other veterans about starting the search. Just what is it like to job hunt as a veteran and to come out of that experience and go into a corporate,
Sure.
sort of environment?
Sure. So I'll talk more broadly about just two of the challenges I think are the biggest ones facing veterans. And I can tell a couple of funny personal stories, but one is we're still battling some perceptions out there about military servicemen and women, right? There's some people out there who still, believe it or not, kind of think that, people coming back home all have post-traumatic stress and they're broken. And I'll tell you, there's a movie coming out. I forget the name of it, but I just got an email yesterday that for a viewing of it. There's a movie coming out about a Iraq War veteran who was a Army medic who joined because there was a mix-up between a girl he wanted to marry or something. Goes overseas, sees combat, comes home, starts doing drugs, and then has to rob a bank to feed his drug habit. So it's like this is what's people are watching, and and it's unfortunately those types of movies just don't are not positive for the veteran community. So I think you're still dealing with some perceptions out there, and it's just I think veterans have to go into some of these interviews just understanding that they may have to explain some things a little bit more. So for me, explaining why I joined the Marine Corps during a time of war. Some people just didn't understand. They're just kind of like, well, why? Like, you were in college. Why did you join? You knew you were going to go overseas, and it's just explaining to them, I had a long history of family who had served in the military, and I felt that I wanted to carry on that tradition. This was my time and way to serve the country, so explaining that a little bit helps. And then also why I got out, so here I am during the interview trying to explain to everyone that I was doing really well, and I was, trying to do everything I could to, talk myself up, and, the response sort of was like, well, it sounded like you had a really great career going. So why did you get out? And it was like, well, that was never really the plan to stay for 20 years. And it's tough deploying constantly. And, I wanted to kind of come back home and settle down and, join corporate America. But it's almost like your career was too good. So something must have happened. You must have got in trouble or whatever. And so there was a little bit of explaining around, why I got out. And it was just, that was always the plan, so I think for veterans, you just have to be prepared to explain to people, your decisions. And I don't necessarily think it was coming from a bad place with some of those folks. I think they genuinely just wanted to know, and they're, for a corporate executive who's looking to hire someone, you want to make sure you're hiring the right person, that they're telling the truth. Right. So like, I don't fault them, or I'm not, wasn't offended at all by it, but it was just a little bit, I guess I was a little unprepared in having to explain, some of those things. So I think vets have to be prepared for that for sure.
I have very little experience in the military, and one of the things I've learned being part of FourBlock is that causes a level of discomfort, right, or awkwardness sometimes in the conversations, where it feels like you were in an entirely different world, right, from what I had been in. What do the best companies or recruiters do that makes a veteran feel that they would get a sense of belonging from that company?
Yeah, sure. So I had one interview, and this was going back to probably 2011 timeframe, and it was with a bank. And the recruiter said, she goes, "Mike, you are the first veteran I've ever interviewed. So I got a lot of questions for you, and I hope you don't mind." I said, "Sure, shoot." And that just opened the door to, it wasn't really an interview. It was just more of a, I don't understand your resume at all, but you seem like a good person, and I just have a lot of questions to ask you. And actually, one of the funny things that came out of that was, at the time, I was a recruiter in New York City, but my official military title was Officer Selection Officer, which is kind of strange, and no one has any idea what that means. And she actually said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "Well, I go to all the universities in New York City and Connecticut, and I recruit college students for officer candidate school." And she goes, "Okay, so you're a university recruiter. Tell me more." I said, "Well, I have a team and I have an area and, blah, blah, blah." And she goes, "Okay, you are a university recruitment manager." She goes, "That's what you need to put in your resume." I said, "Oh, okay." So, little things like that make a world of difference. And, from a veteran standpoint, it's tough to translate your job title. So it's tough to understand, like, officer selection officer means university recruitment manager, or it's tough to translate, I was the commanding officer, or I was the platoon sergeant, and that means VP at a company. It's like so tough to kind of figure that out. And you almost really need someone to just investigate a little bit for you, or someone at that company who is a veteran, who does sort of understand and have like that Rosetta Stone, who can say, "Hey, you were a platoon sergeant, so that means you are this title at this level at this company." So that's why it's so important sometimes to connect with people at that company, because they could really help refine that resume so that everyone understands it.
This is getting quite a lot of comments in chat. So I think there's people, Mike, saying, like, how can we do more, quite simply? And I think you've spoken to some of that, but is there anything else, if there's people who just want to kind of create action? You said that they can reach out to you, but is there anything else you would say if you've not got a strong veteran program where you want to get started? Any tips? And then I'm going to go back to Gemma's point as well. Sure.
So with our program, so we've got, let's see here, we've got 18 programs plus the spouse program. So we've got 18 veteran career readiness programs that are going on around the country. And then we have our spouse program. And in those 18 veteran programs, there are about 10 weeks or so a piece. Some are a little bit more in some locations. And every week we basically visit a new corporate location. So, 1 week could be company ABC, the next week is company, XYZ. And at those companies, people from those companies, participate, and they help teach the curriculum. They help mentor the veterans through the curriculum there, and they also talk about their company. They talk about the career pathways. So there's, from a corporate or employer host perspective, we've got 80, 90, 100 companies hosting this semester. So if you feel that your company would be a good fit for something like that, certainly reach out to us, and we can try to squeeze you in this semester, or get you ready for next semester. If you're an individual who just wants to give back, we have 150, 200 coaches who participate throughout our semester as well. So we basically link a veteran with a skills coach, and the skills coach has 5 or 6 conversations with the veteran throughout the semester to basically just make sure that they're on the path to success, right? So you're just there to sort of 30-minute, 60-minute conversation every couple of weeks, review the resume, make sure that they're understanding everything, and then just kind of support them and help them out. And if that person needs extra help, the coach calls the instructor and says, hey, Mike needs a little bit extra help. He's just not getting it, or whatever. So they're sort of the first line of defense in making sure that veteran has everything they need to be successful. So those are, 2 easy examples, where people can get involved.
Amazing. Thank you. One of the things that we're curious about, particularly at the moment, is how the pandemic's impacted your work at FourBlock, your programs. Love to know kind of maybe the pros and cons of having to go virtual, and anything you might keep as a result.
Sure. So we made the decision, it was, I believe, the first week of March last year, to, through March, go virtual, because we had some companies coming back and saying, we don't know what's going on, our employees aren't coming in, I'm not sure we can host, and we wanted to give some consistency with our students. We didn't want to email them the morning of a class and say, you have to go in, or tonight's virtual. So we just said, through the end of March, we're going to be virtual. It's communicated to everybody. And then at the end of March, let's reassess on what's going on in the world, and we'll go from there. But everyone knows, we've been virtual ever since. But there has been some goodness that has occurred from that. So one is, we've had more people take our program this fall and this spring than we've ever had before. So our enrollment has shot up significantly. So that was a plus. The second piece was, students were not inhibited by where they were geographically. So we had someone from active duty service member from Korea, from Australia. We had a military spouse from Ukraine, from Italy. We had people who were stationed in Fort Lewis taking the program in Charlotte, because that's where they knew that they were going to retire to. So it was interesting to see sort of people taking programs in different locations, because that is where they ultimately wanted to end up. So that was something that was really good. I'll just tell you a quick story. But before COVID hit, I went to, this was the previous fall. We had launched Charlotte, and I went down there for the last class for our Charlotte program. And in walks this gentleman, suit and tie, looking good. And he looks at me and goes, I know you. And I said, if you've been part of the program, you probably seen me talk or seen videos of me or whatever. And he goes, no, this is my first class. He's like, I'm not really part of the program, but I called the instructor and I came down here, because I want to retire. And I said, oh, okay. So we started talking. I go, are you a local, you here at a local base? He goes, no. He goes, I live in Albany, New York, but I want to retire to Charlotte. So I flew down here for this class. I was like, what? So I live in Albany, New York. And I go, what? So he literally lives like 10 minutes from me, but he got connected with our instructor, and the classes with Wells Fargo. And he was really interested in working for Wells Fargo in Charlotte. So he actually flew down and he came in here. And the other funny piece was, the reason why he knows me was I'm still in the reserves and I teach a class at the Pentagon. 2 weeks prior to that, he attended the class that I was teaching and managing at the Pentagon. So it's just this weird sort of connection that we had. But so now people don't have to fly around anymore. They could just zoom in wherever they are and know that they're getting connected to a location that they're going to eventually move to.
That sounds so foreign now, doesn't it? The idea of flying somewhere to do something. Right. Mike, you originally started FourBlock sort of with a partnership of Columbia University, and we have a lot of people watching who are university career services professionals or university affiliated. Can you talk about how universities fit into this picture with veterans?
Sure, absolutely. So the a lot of the students that we support are student veterans. So these are veterans who have gotten off active duty, and they are utilizing the post 9/11 GI Bill to pursue a 4-year degree. So we work with a lot of sophomores, juniors, and seniors who are in various majors, and we're looking to get in a lot of different industries. So when I first started FourBlock, I had a lot of students from Columbia University. So Columbia School of General Studies is really one of the leading edge companies in supporting veterans. So the story there, and this goes back, I'll try to tell it really quick. So Columbia has a School of General Studies that was created in 1947 to support, in large part, returning World War II vets when they were getting the GI Bill. So they created sort of this night school for non-traditional students for that demographic of veterans who are coming back home. And then over the years, it sort of took different shape. And then when the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan kicked off, the dean of the school, a man named Peter Rahn, and then at the time, dean of admissions, Curtis Rogers, who's now the vice dean, they said, what can we do? Like, let's get back to our roots here. Let's try to support, these returning servicemen and women. At the time, I believe they had maybe 20 or 25 student veterans or so. And Dean Rahn really put his reputation on the line and just said, if we as a university care about diversity, then we need to care about diversity in age, and diversity in experience. And we need to really embrace, these veterans who are coming home. And what ended up happening was there was, and let me take a step back. The School of General Studies, the students there it's the same academic program as the Columbia College students and the engineering students. So it's not separate faculty, it's the exact same programming. So these non-traditional students are going into the classroom with, these 18, 19-year-old kids who are coming from, a lot of these, big time private schools high schools around the country and everything. And what ended up happening was the faculty members came back to Dean Rahn and said, I have a veteran in my, geopolitical politics class of the Middle East. And wow, it was awesome to have an Iraq war veteran in that class, speak to, some of these issues. He goes, I want a couple more next semester. So the faculty ended up coming back and saying, we want more veterans. And it really took off and grew. In, I want to say 2017 or 2018, the valedictorian was a former Marine sergeant. And the salutatorian was a 55-year-old mother of 3 who started a family young and ended up going back to college. So that was a perfect sort of representation almost of just kind of what that school does. So anyway, back in 2012 timeframe, I got an email from Dean Rahn out of the blue. I had no idea who he was. And he just said, hi, Mike, I got, a lot of my students are taking your class. I've heard good things. Why don't you come up to campus? I'd love to talk to you. And I felt like I was going to see the principal, to a degree. I was like, can I do something wrong here? But met with Dean Rahn, met with Curtis, and had a couple of his students who were also taking my program. We met for breakfast, and he just said, I'm really impressed. We're never going to have 5,000 students at Columbia, but we can have an impact with that many by supporting a program like yours. So what can we do for you? And that started a relationship where they helped basically make our curriculum a lot better. Up to that point, it was just sort of me putting a lot of good stuff together. But he gave us an instructional designer, gave us an educational technologist. We were able to put it online. It became a blended program. And that really helped us expand because it sort of made FourBlock kind of standard curriculum that students in Boston and Seattle and New York could all take. So there was like that standard curriculum, but then there was a local flavor with the companies and the instructors and things. So that's where sort of the relationship with Columbia happened. And unfortunately, Dean Rahn, he was walking home from Columbia a couple of years ago, and he was struck by a car in New York City, and he passed. So he was an incredible man, and he's done a lot for the veteran community.
So many incredible takeaways, Mike, that you're sharing here. Just as we come to close, I want to pick up on something from Gemma Elson, who is the Global Campus Head of Talent for Fidelity. And Gemma's saying just how important it is for HR people to be able to interview and help in a veteran interview kind of translate resume and CV. I just wonder if you've had any experience of training HR folks into how to interview veterans well. And any tips that you would give. You've mentioned a little bit about kind of the experience you had, but I just wonder if there is is any opportunity of training HR people?
Sure. I mean, we do a lot of that, particularly with the companies that we work with. We work, there's been companies that we've gone in and actually done resume reviews for them. We've sat down with them and went through resumes for certain jobs and helped translate, what those veteran resumes actually meant. So I would just say, I mean, for someone who has not served, just have an open mind. I think sometimes you get caught into you've got 200 applicants for this one job, and you're just looking for sort of these 3 to 5 nuggets or basic requirements. And if you don't see them right away, you kind of just put it in the no pile, or maybe you throw it in the maybe pile. So I would just say, if you come across a resume and you're just really not sure, throw it in the maybe pile. And what a lot of companies have been doing now, which I think is a great strategy, is they've been if they have a veteran affinity network or an ERG, or even if they just have a veteran who works at the company, they've integrated them into the resume review or the interview process. So, if me, Mike Abrams, Marine, veteran, I'm working at company ABC, I could be doing something, completely logistics, right, or something. But an HR professional could say, "Hey, Mike, I've got these stack of 15 veteran resumes. Could you just help me kind of look at these?" Now, the problem with that too is that there are 6,000 military specialties. And me as a Marine, I have no idea what most of probably the Air Force and the Navy and even some of the Army specialties or resumes are even going to look like. So I can give you sort of a basic of, all right, this person was a corporal, this person was a captain, and sort of this is what they were doing and kind of what they were responsible for. But particularly some of the technical roles, I wouldn't even be able to give you really good input on it. So you really need to find someone at your company who can help translate that for you, and just hopefully you got another veteran who could do that.
I love the idea of ERGs, employee resource groups, being involved. I also think, Mike, you should probably start moving to Hollywood, and instead of these movies about people coming back with PTSD and becoming criminals, they could be coming back, becoming corporate recruiters, and picking resumes out of a pile. That would be very exciting film.
It would probably be a more well-paying job, but I'm not sure that's as entertaining. But I will tell a story real quick. There was a good friend of mine who was in Afghanistan with his father, was a POW in Vietnam. He was a fighter pilot who got shot down, and he was there for the unveiling of the Vietnam Memorial in DC. And he tells a story of, it was him. I mean, there's a lot of Vietnam era veterans, who were there for the unveiling, and he was selected along with a bunch of other of his peers there to do an interview with a national news network. And they're there, they're clean shaven, suit and tie, they're looking professional. They all had kind of moved on with their lives and they were very successful in the business world. And the reporter came up and he goes, "Where are the Vietnam veterans?" And the producer said, "They're right here." He goes, No. He goes, I want those guys over there. And it was the ones who had sort of the long hair. Gets into the perception thing, right? They had, the patches, everyone knows what I'm talking about, right? But that is what the image of, what this reporter wanted in a Vietnam era veteran. He didn't want the professional who was able to move on and be successful. And, so that's what we're battling to a degree.
Mike, thank you so much for your time. And we've had an incredible number of comments and engagement. And I know that people, when they listen back to this as well, will want to reach out to you at FourBlock. You've been incredibly eloquent with your tips and things that will really support the individuals who are listening to this show. So thank you for your time and for the work that FourBlock does. And Lindsay, for making the introduction. I think when I was with you in New York last January or early Feb, you'd mentioned Mike, and it's been great to get to know you and FourBlock, and we really hope that you continue to flourish at these times, but also in the amazing service that you're delivering. Lindsay, I'm going to pass to you to close and also ask you to share next week's guests. And I will wish everyone safe times at these crazy times, and we'll look forward to next week.
I would love to do that, Nikki. If you can just refresh my memory of who next week's guests are.
We will get Haley to post them up in the window. I know the focus is mental health next week, and we have two special individuals.
Thank you very much for the reminder. I'm so focused on Mike Abrams that I had not thought about next week. Next week, we are thrilled to welcome Alexandra Levitt, who is a career advice author who is partnering on a study about mental health and job hunting with Stuart Shankman of the Northwestern University Medical School. So we'll be talking a lot about mental health, which I think is a great follow-up to this. But Mike, it is such an honor to know you, work with you. Thank you for your service to our country and to veterans and to corporate America, really. So I'll leave you with the last word, Mike. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. And I enjoy going to work every day.
Nothing better than that. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.